Hello. I just got back from campus. I had a coffee, but that I brought from campus. I don't know where I set it. It's gone. All right, I don't need it anyway. Let me tell you, I have not been drinking enough water, and ladies, men have it so easy. I feel like they take one sip of water and they're fine. I mean, I'm starting to get like that pressure in my abdomen that's like, girl, you need to drink some water, or you're about to be infected. Okay, let me put my phone on silent. And let's finish this chapter of the Royals. Because I have to go back to campus later. I'm alone today, so I'm having a bad hair day. It's just has no real shape. Can't really anyway, we don't come here for this. Okay, I haven't said it for a while, so please like, subscribe, hit the bell. Join us. We're a cult now. No, I'm joking. We're not a cult. Unless. Tell all your girlfriends who like royal content and want to join in. You can tell your guy friends too. You can tell your boyfriends. It's not just for women. Sorry that I said that. I guess I just talk about a lot of female things, so all are welcome. All right. Where were we? Yes, we were just talking about how Winston Churchill looked like a big red tomato. The lords and ladies took their places on their little gold chairs with tufted velvet cushions. Outside, the populace camped on the curb or sat in one of the $14 stadium seats erected to watch the Queen pass in her golden carriage, wearing her heavy crown and holding her orb, a jeweled globe, in one hand and her scepter, a jeweled rod, in the other. Heralded by trumpets and the voices of 400 young Westminster choir boys, the Queen made her way down the aisle of the Abbey to begin the ancient ritual of her coronation. Throughout the ceremony, the Duke of Edinburgh, sitting with the princes of the blood royal, the Duke of Gloucester, sorry, my brain stopped. It was like, huh? And the young Duke of Kent never for one moment took his eyes off her. At times, he leaned forward tensely as she went through the elaborate ceremony. The supreme moment of the day was timed for 12:30 p.m., when the Archbishop of Canterbury anointed Her Majesty with sacred holy oil and placed the crown on her head, proclaiming her Queen Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of her other realms and territories, Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, sovereign of the British Orders of Knighthood, Captain General of the Royal Regiment of Artillery. Those words enthroned the monarch, whose blood flows from the Saxon King Egbert through Henry VIII and Mary, Queen of Scots, linking Elizabeth II to almost every English sovereign since William the Conqueror. There's a note. Each of 3 children of Henry VIII became sovereign, King Edward VI, Queen Mary I, and Queen Elizabeth I, and each died childless. As queen, she became supreme governor of the Church of England and defender of the faith. Her royal prerogative gave her 10 powers: dismiss the government, declare war, disband the army, sell all the ships in the navy, dismiss the civil service, give territory away to a foreign power, make anyone appear, declare a state of emergency, pardon all offenders, establish a university in any parish. As a constitutional monarch, she reigns but does not rule. Her only rights are to be consulted, to be informed, to encourage, and to warn, and even those are more limited than they were in the days of her ancestors. Her role is mostly ceremonial, and her activities, opening Parliament, signing legislation, appointing officials, bestowing medals and titles, are ritual. In practice, her official actions are no more than mandatory approvals of her government's wishes. Still, her symbolic power is considerable, for as the Queen, she personifies Great Britain. The government is Her Majesty's government, not Britain's government. British passports are issued in the name of Her Majesty, not in the name of the state. Her face appears on stamps and coins. Her royal arms dominate the judiciary. Her royal insignia governs the church. Cabinet ministers are her ministers, state departments are her agencies, and those living within her realm are her subjects. There are no citizens, only subjects in Great Britain. And the country's armed forces are the police, and the police serve the Queen, not the people. Her greatest power as queen is the emotional hold she exerts on her people, who toast her health at every formal banquet and dinner, and whose national anthem beseeches God to protect her. As the fountainhead of such honor, she is a sacred symbol that elevates her above criticism. From this pinnacle, she commands absolute fealty. Let's look that up. Just one moment.
Fealty.
A feudal tenant's or vassal's sworn loyalty to a lord. Okay. Gotcha. Because of her exalted position, wrote the Duke of Windsor in his coronation article for an American magazine, it is possible for the monarch, by the influence of example and personality, to impart a character and coloring to an era in a manner that lies quite outside the day-to-day functions of government. After the Archbishop set the crown on her head, Prince Philip rose to be the first to pay her homage. In the full dress uniform of Admiral of the Fleet, he walked to the foot of the throne, took off his coronet, and bowed. He walked up the 5 steps and knelt at his wife's feet. She took his hands in her own, as he said, I, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die against all manner of folks, so help me God. They almost sound like wedding vows, don't they? I mean, I think those would be, as wedding vows, I think they would be terribly meaningful. I mean, faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die against all manner of folks. That is beautiful. So help me God. I mean, did she fall in love with him all over again as he spoke these words to her? Because I would. He touched her crown and kissed her left cheek before returning to his chair. It was a gesture which had all the humility of a subject and the tenderness of a husband, wrote a British journalist, and for a brief moment the Queen pressed her cheek close and firm to her husband. Oh. That night the young Queen paid public tribute to the man she had married. In a radio address to her loyal subjects, she pledged with all my heart to devote her life to the service of her people. In this resolve, she said, I have my husband to support me. The Queen entered Westminster Abbey to the shouts of Vivat Regina. As she departed, trumpets sounded, and church bells pealed. Enraptured crowds cheered as the stately coaches of 74 foreign powers made their way along the coronation route. Despite the downpour, Queen Salote of Tonga rode in an open carriage, the only head of state to do so. An enormous woman, she waved her huge fleshy arms to greet bystanders, and completely overshadowed the frail little man sharing her carriage. What's sitting across from her? Someone asked. Her lunch, said Noel Coward. Oh, wasn't he an evil little man? Oh, so clever. The sultans of Brunei, Johor, Perak, Lahej, Kalimantan, Selangor, and Zanzibar passed in colorful turbans, silk saris, and extravagant plumage. The native dress of the Zulus, Arabs, Indians, Chinese, and Nepalese dazzled bystanders. I keep on saying standards. I'm sorry. I used to be able to read so well. The more I read, guys, the worse I'm getting. Oh well. Bystanders. To heighten the drama of the parade, BBC technicians laid microphones on the ground to magnify the thundering beat of the horses' hooves and tape-recorded nightingales to sing continuously in Berkeley Square. The emotion reduced some men to tears. When her carriage went past, I felt as if my heart were bursting, said Richard Smith, a soldier on duty. We were virtually crying as we presented arms to the Queen. We were no more than 10 yards away, and I don't think I've seen anything as beautiful in all my life. Similar feelings swept through the Abbey. Although our preparation was intense, the one thing the rehearsals hadn't prepared us for was the emotion of the ceremony, especially the entry of the Queen in her procession, said a radio announcer, John Snag. I was overwhelmed. Handel's Music for Royal Fireworks on the organ, everyone standing, then Perry's anthem. Oh, it was the most moving moment. The BBC engineer, who was supposed to black out close-ups of the Queen during the coronation, was so transfixed that he could not bring himself to cut the lights and censor her image. Gorgeous she was, recalled the engineer, Ben Shaw. I thought the close-up picture of her was so beautiful that I couldn't press the button. Oh, it's so precious. As Queen, Elizabeth became the head of 2 separate churches, the Church of England, which is Episcopalian, and the Church of Scotland, which is Presbyterian. For her assumption of authority, she took the sacraments and worshipped in both churches. In England, she prayed as an Anglican, and in Scotland as a Presbyterian. Having sworn to govern all her peoples according to their respective laws and customs, she travelled north soon after her coronation in London for a second coronation in Edinburgh to receive the ancient crown of Scotland. This was her first visit to Scotland as Queen, and, naturally, everyone expected her to come in her coronation robes, recalled Margaret McCormick, who attended the event. I was in my Sunday best and was so shocked when she appeared in a simple gray-blue coat because she looked so ordinary. She should have honored the occasion more. In St. Giles Cathedral, the Queen, who was surrounded by the Scottish peerage in their velvet cloaks and coronets, looked strangely out of place in black leather shoes, a grey-blue felt hat, and a street-length coat, especially next to the Duke of Edinburgh, who was dressed magnificently in a plumed helmet and gold-braided uniform. The most jarring part of the Queen's attire was the big black purse she was carrying in the crook of her arm. To the Scots, she looked like a middle-class housewife on her way to the grocery. Now, why in the world wouldn't have someone planned for this? That seems a little wild. I mean, who in the world would set her husband up with his plumage and his helmet and then be like, you can wear your street coat and you can hold your purse. It's fine. Just right there. Park it right there, sister. That is wild to me. Ugh. Anyway. And kind of a letdown for the people of Scotland, right? Guys, I got to do my nails tonight. Okay. At the altar, she stepped forward, while the Duke of Hamilton and Brandon knelt before her in his coronation robes to proffer the crown of Scotland on a velvet cushion with gold tassels. As she reached toward him, her leather handbag, which was as large as a bread box, almost hit him in the face. He quickly moved his head to avoid getting smacked by the royal purse. Okay, am I the only one thinking that that's a little... Oh, dear. In the official painting commemorating the ceremony, the Queen is shown receiving the ancient crown of Scotland, but without her handbag. The Scottish portrait artist deliberately left out the purse, because he could not bear to render his sovereign looking like a commoner. The atmosphere around the Queen was so reverential that no one dared utter a word of criticism about her attire, which was viewed by some in Scotland as insulting. I certainly imagine it would be. I certainly think so. I don't think it was intended to be insulting, and obviously I don't think it's Elizabeth's fault at all, but her dresser would have been on the hook, I think. Should have been on the hook. Because she should have known better. She would falter a few more times in her new role, but each misstep would be carefully papered over by her courtiers, whose mission in life was to burnish the myth that The monarch was perfect. These courtiers, whose families had been in royal service for hundreds of years, were either military men or from the landed gentry. The circle, now what does landed gentry mean? Let's find out. Guys, I really need water, or I'm going to need an antibiotic soon. Okay, landed gentry means the landed gentry is a traditional British social class consisting of gentlemen in the original sense, that is, those who owned land in the form of country estates to such an extent that they were not required to actively work except in an administrative capacity of their own lands. Oh, landed. Oh, now I'm thinking as a Canadian, and so therefore I'm thinking in like an immigrant sort of way, because I mean, my family, even, 200 years ago, are immigrants, right? Of course. So I'm thinking landed, as in they took a boat and they landed. But landed gentry, as in has land. Oh, learning. Yay. Okay. Landed gentry. Blah, blah, blah. The circle around the throne is aristocratic, editorialized the Daily Mirror, as insular and, there is no other word for it, as toffee-nosed as it has ever been. What does toffee-nosed mean? I can't look up everything. Okay. The courtiers felt that their positions were ordained in the book of Proverbs. A scribe skillful in his office, he shall find himself worthy of being a courtier. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. With a heightened sense of superiority, these courtiers did for the queen what they had always done for her father. They determined what she would do and say publicly, and whom she would see, from debutantes to diplomats. The courtiers also protected the crown from stain, blemish, and disgrace. They did this by controlling the flow of information to the public. In the beginning of Elizabeth's reign, the courtiers expected reporters to be deferential, and for the most part the press obliged. This fandango between press and palace enabled the courtiers to fabricate news, withhold information, and impose restrictions without question. The courtiers manipulated the press to mold public opinion, and some of their efforts to make the monarch appear worthy of respect seem ridiculous in retrospect. But their dedication was unquestionable, and their loyalty unswerving. In the beginning of Elizabeth's reign, her courtiers sought to present her as grand yet genteel. They refused to admit that she enjoyed playing canasta, or that for her first royal portrait sitting... Can you hear that? They are renovating the apartment upstairs. The courtiers manipulated the press to mold public opinion. Blah, 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 blah. In the beginning of Elizabeth's reign, her courtiers sought to present her, she liked playing canasta, or that for her first royal portrait sitting, she arrived carrying her tiara in an egg box. They reluctantly admitted she loved horse races, a fact not worth denying because she was constantly at the track, but they claimed she never gambled. Right. Her Majesty never bets, but she shows great delight when a royal horse wins, the Queen's press secretary told U.S. News and World Report. In fact, the Queen always bet on her horses and twice topped the list of money-winning owners on British tracks in 1954 and 1957. She even advised the palace stewards when not to bet on her horses. Yet, because gambling was illegal and something that the courtiers felt a revered monarch should not indulge in, they promoted the fairy tale that the Queen never wagered. Within 4 years, a critic denounced these courtiers as fusty, old-fashioned, and hidebound. The critic, Lord Altrincham, derided them as a second-rate lot. Altrincham later renounced his hereditary title and became simply known as John Grigg. An historian, he achieved recognition as the man who publicly criticized the Queen as priggish and poorly educated, and lambasted all the Queen's men as blinkered and inept. Isn't that something, that he renounced his hereditary title? At the time of the coronation, such criticism was so outrageous as to be blasphemous. The monarchy was still revered, even though The monarchy was still revered enough that even those who served it were considered untouchable. The only voice of dissent being heard came from within the palace walls, and that was the irascible growl of the Queen's husband, who was appalled by the inefficiency he found all around him. Pronouncing his wife's courtiers creaky and their administration of Buckingham Palace medieval, Prince Philip scorched most of the 230 servants as goddamned idiots who wait on each other, not on us. Insisting on naval efficiency, he regarded the 690-room palace as a leaky old rust bucket that he had to make seaworthy. Beginning with the footmen, he said the practice of powdering their hair with a messy mixture of soap, water, flour, and starch was old-fashioned and unmanly. He stopped it. He pronounced the palace communication system hopelessly antiquated and instituted a system to get rid of the bloody pages running all over the place. He ordered a modern intercom installed so that with the flick of a switch, the Queen could contact him, her secretaries, the children's nannies, even her chef. Next, the gadget-minded Duke ordered intercoms put in every office and two-way radios put in all royal cars. He introduced dictaphones, tape recorders, and automated filing systems. He had washing machines installed in the palace basement to replace the platoon of laundresses scrubbing overtime on washed boards. Are you kidding me? In the 1950s in the palace, they've still got girls, in the basement. I mean, I feel bad for them in a sense because that's their job gone. But that's crazy business. He ended the palace system of running several dining rooms at full steam all day long just so the servants could eat. He commissioned small pantries with hot plates and refrigerators to be installed in the royal suites so servants would not have to walk 3 miles of corridors just to take the Queen her coffee every morning. He did away with placing a fresh bottle of scotch by the monarch's bed, a quaint practice that had been going on since 1910 when Edward VII asked for whiskey to counteract a cold. No one had ever canceled the order. I bet. I'll take the edge off every evening. He did allow the Queen to keep her bagpiper. In the tradition started by Queen Victoria, the pipe major of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders marches across the terrace of the palace at 9 o'clock every morning, playing the bagpipes. For the hidebound courtiers, who preferred having young pages in silk breeches running messages by foot, as they had done in the days of Queen Victoria, Philip was radically disruptive. They protested his time-motion studies of the staff and objected to his heliport behind the palace to save commuting time. They opposed his plan for marketing surplus peas from the farmlands at Sandringham and sneered when he installed bread slicers and carrot washing machines. They objected when he ordered that Queen Victoria's orangery at Windsor Castle be converted into a heated swimming pool. They especially disapproved of his mingling with the masses and said he didn't distinguish between commoners and aristocrats. They cringed when he entertained labor leaders and shuddered when he invited movie stars to lunch with the Queen. Allowing film stars into Buckingham Palace was worse than permitting untouchables into a shrine. Why, that German princeling, snapped the Queen's private secretary, Tommy Lascelles, who did not understand or appreciate Philip's effort to keep his wife attuned to the real world. That man is no gentleman, said Commander Sir Richard Colville, the Queen's press secretary, fuming, and he has no friends who are gentlemen. For a courtier whose honor was invested in being considered a gentleman, this was a debasing insult. But the swipe was passed privately. There's a note. In 1995, anthropologist Geoffrey Gorer wrote a book exploring English character, in which he questioned the beliefs, prejudices, and habits of mind of large numbers of the English middle class. He found that the English people as a whole are deeply obsessed with restraining any element of violence and rate gentleness very high as a virtue. They regard impatience and loss of temper as major sins. Being considered a gentleman means everything. As so-called gentlemen, the courtiers were careful to be correct in public because they could not afford to be openly hostile to the Queen's husband. On the surface, they acted civilized, and in his presence they addressed him respectfully. Behind his back, they savaged him. Philip, who cared little about being defined as a gentleman, barged ahead with his sweeping innovations. It's our job to make this monarchy business work, he said. He functioned for the Queen in much the same way Eleanor Roosevelt had done for the president. She had been his eyes and ears, his emissary to the masses. Philip was determined to revitalize the crown and make it relevant to people's lives. He accepted honorary positions with groups like the National Playing Fields Association and fought hard to establish the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, which rewards young people for outstanding achievement in sports, cultural activities, and voluntary service. The Ministry of Education was highly suspicious of a scheme bearing the obvious imprint of Dr. Kurt Hahn, the German founder of Gordonstown, which was Philip's alma mater. The Minister of Education was more than a little dubious about the Duke of Edinburgh. I had a rather difficult interview, admitted Philip many years later. As with all our organization, it worked on the not invented here syndrome. Anything you haven't thought of yourself is bound to be wrong, but gradually as they came to realize what the scheme was about, and that it wasn't a new Hitler Youth movement, people began to realize that there was some merit in it. There's a note. The Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme is operated in more than 55 countries, but under a variety of names. The Ben Low Award in Belgium, the Crown Prince Award in Jordan, the Gold Shield Award in South Africa. In Australia, Jamaica, and New Zealand, it is called the D of E. Prince Philip says, I don't give a damn what they call it, as long as it's compatible with the one that runs here. Aw, bless him. With frenetic energy, Philip toured plants and factories and schools, constantly asking questions. How do you make that work? Can't you find a better way, faster, more efficient? He fought the courtiers at every turn, refusing to let them write his speeches, and worse, refusing to follow their advice, to say nothing. He insisted on being heard, and to their dismay, he was. As president of the British Association for the Advancement of Science, he hectored the members for being complacent. It's no good shutting your eyes and saying British is best 3 times a day after meals and expecting it to be so, he said. I'm afraid our no men are 1,000 times more harmful than the American yes men. If we are to recover prosperity, we shall have to find ways of emancipating energy and enterprise from the frustrating control of the constitutionally timid. The courtiers worried about negative press reaction to Philip's outspokenness. Already overworked, they had been trying for months to squelch a potential scandal involving the Queen's 23-year-old sister, Princess Margaret, and Group Captain Peter Townsend, the 38-year-old equerry who had served her father since 1944 and was now working for her mother as deputy master of the household. For months, the courtiers had been denying rumors of a romance. But a newspaper photograph taken during the coronation showed the princess flicking a piece of fluff from Townsend's shoulder. The intimacy of that small passing gesture revealed the truth and threw the palace into confusion. And how brilliant for the person who noticed that and called it as what it was. That was very insightful because that's exactly how it works. A fighter pilot in World War II's Battle of Britain, Peter Townsend had received the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Distinguished Service Order for Valor. He then became the king's favorite equerry. What exactly is an equerry? I keep on saying this. I'm probably even pronouncing it wrong. Let's look it up together.
Equerry.
Okay, I've been saying it right. An officer of the British royal household who attends or assists members of the royal family. Okay, well, that's simple enough. All right, where were we? 38-year-old equerry who had served her father since 1944 and was now working for her mother as deputy master of the household. For months, the courtiers had been denying rumors of a romance. Oh, we already did this. Flicking the lint off. Threw the palace into confusion. So he won the thing, and then he became the king's favorite equerry. With the same gentle appeal of Leslie Howard playing Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind. Ew. I never found Leslie Howard at all appealing in Gone with the Wind. I found him to be a thin-spined little milksop of a man who didn't have any hope of character or of developing character because he stayed with Melanie. He didn't have the courage to admit he loved Scarlett when he did love her. And he didn't actually love her, though. That's the thing. He wanted her. He didn't love her. He didn't have the courage to be with her when he could have been with her. And then once he married Melanie, I think he cheated. Well, in the book, he does cheat. Well, does he cheat? I don't know if he actually goes through with it. They maybe kiss, but I do remember. So in the book is different than the movie. Those of you who have read the book. He said that he wanted to, they were in the barn and she's like, you don't love me. And he's like, oh, I love you. Like, I wish I could take you right here in the mud. I hate him. Okay. Anyway. Okay, so he's the same gentle appeal of Leslie Howard. Okay, I'm failing to see how that would be a good thing, but Townsend was a charming man with humor. He was not robust and swaggering like Prince Philip, but slightly fragile and emotional. He stammered, which was one reason the king, who also stammered, loved him. Aw. Townsend had suffered a nervous breakdown in the RAF and had been grounded occasionally because of his incurable nervous eczema. To everyone who met him, he appeared graceful and considerate, the paradigm of an officer and a gentleman. We were all in love with him, said British novelist Angela Lambert. He was handsome, brave, romantic, and discreet, wrote Francois Nourricier in Le Figaro upon his death in 1995. He was one of those men without whose heroism and sacrifice our lives would have been no doubt less free, less honorable. An England, which I hope still exists, invented a kind of complete man that was one of the successes of Europe. Peter Townsend was the last of this species, now threatened with extinction. I don't know. I like my men a little rough. Like, my man and I are so different. Like, we're the same in values. But he's a tradesman and he's a little rough sometimes. And he's a little, how can I say it? It's not that he's not gentle. It's just like he's rough in the way that he speaks. And it's like he gives tough love, like he's not overly gentle. And, sometimes I'll be crying about something and he's just there like patting me, slapping me on the back like I'm a man. And I'm like, ow. I'm like, stop. I'm not your bro. But I like it. I don't know. I just don't think that I could be attracted to a man that was compared to Leslie Howard. I'm sorry. I'm stuck on that. I'm failing to see, because all I can think of is Leslie Howard with that tiny little lilting voice, that cadence that I could never be sexually attracted to. Like that's all I can hear in my head. His little blonde hairs. No. Okay. That's it. Oh, this is a little gross right here. Townsend had known Margaret since she was 14 years old. Okay. I don't like that. As a favor to her parents, had escorted her to dances and horse shows. Oh, guys. Was there stuff going on? Do you think there was stuff going on then? He served as her riding companion and flown her plane in the King's Cup air races. By the time she was 21, she had fallen in love with him. She pursued him openly, and each time he resisted her advances, she resorted to her royal prerogatives. Coming home from a dance one evening, she demanded that he carry her up the stairs. He demurred. She insisted. He still resisted. "Peter, this is a royal order," she said, stamping her foot. The handsome equerry laughed and scooped her into his arms. "Ever your obedient servant, Mom," he said, sweeping her up the staircase of Clarence House. I hate a cheating man like nothing else. And so I'm just like, this ain't no great love story to me, because the first thing he should have done was resign and find another job out of respect for his wife and his marriage. But we know that didn't happen. He was too... Anyway. Okay, I'll stop. Margaret was quite blatant, said her friend Evelyn Prebenson, whose father, the Norwegian ambassador, was dean of the diplomatic corps in London. I spent a lot of time with her in those days, and remember one Christmas when the king had promised Peter time off to be with his family. Margaret got it into her head that she wanted to play cards, and she insisted Peter play with her. So he was forced to forego the holiday with his family and dance attendance on Margaret. No wonder his wife wandered. I mean, I don't think she should have cheated either, but I'm just like, sir. Anyway. In 1952, Townsend was granted a divorce on the grounds of his wife's adultery and received custody of their 2 sons. Although he was the aggrieved party, his divorce traumatized the Queen's courtiers, who still felt haunted by the 1936 divorce that had led to the only voluntary abdication in British history and resulted in exile for the disgraced king. Divorce was considered such an abomination that the Lord Chamberlain, head of the Queen's household in England, had to ensure that no divorced person was ever allowed into the Queen's presence. Okay, there's 2 notes. In later years, the Lord Chamberlain's duties were modified so the Queen could visit her divorced cousins, her divorced sister, her divorced daughter, and her divorced sons, including the heir to the throne. Oh my goodness, there's lipstick on my teeth. The restrictions on divorced persons being allowed to share the same heir as royalty were relaxed slightly after Peter Townsend's divorce. Only those divorced persons who were legally blameless for their divorce were admitted into the company of royalty. This policy allowed Townsend, who was wronged by an adulterous wife, to continue in royal service. From 1950 to 1953, he acted as head of the Queen Mother's household. For the rest of his life, even in exile, his name was listed in Whitaker's Almanac as an extra equerry to Her Majesty, the Queen. He was even excluded from the royal enclosure at Ascot, such a distinguished figure as Laurence Olivier, considered England's greatest actor because of his divorce. In Scotland, Lion King of Arms was the moral arbiter, and he too struck the names of all divorced persons from royal guest lists. One Scottish nobleman protested his exclusion from the royal visit to Edinburgh because he had been divorced. "My marriage was annulled," said the nobleman, "and I have been remarried in the church." "That may well allow you into the kingdom of heaven," said the Lion King of Arms, "but it will not get you into the palace of Holyrood House." Oh my goodness. In 1953, Princess Margaret's love affair with Townsend, a divorced man, shook the British establishment, and the government, the church, and the royal family became intensely embroiled in the romance. As a royal princess, Margaret Rose, who was third in line to the throne, was excused for falling in love, while Townsend, a commoner, was condemned for crossing class lines. "What cheek," said the Duke of Edinburgh. "Equerries should look after the horses." The Queen's courtiers were equally outraged. They believed in the supremacy of the class system as defined by the doggerel they had learned as children. "God bless the squire and all his relations, and keep us in our proper stations." When Peter Townsend confided he had fallen in love with Princess Margaret, the Queen's private secretary, Alan Lascelles, snapped, "You must either be mad or bad." Lascelles quickly conferred with the Prime Minister. Captain Townsend must go," declared Winston Churchill. "He simply must go." In desperation, the courtiers decided to follow Churchill's advice and banish Townsend from England. They foolishly believed his relationship with the princess would founder under the separation, not realizing that distance might lend enchantment. They cared only about buying time until Margaret's 25th birthday. Until then, she was not allowed to marry without her sister's permission. And as head of the Church of England, her sister could never allow her to marry a divorced man. By separating the couple, the courtiers also quashed the publicity that threatened to overshadow the Queen's first royal tour of the Commonwealth. Townsend, who was scheduled to accompany Princess Margaret and the Queen Mother on their 1953 tour of Rhodesia, was suddenly yanked out of royal service and dispatched to the embassy in Brussels as an heir attaché. I came here because the position was impossible for us both, he told a reporter. I cannot answer questions because I am not the prime mover in the situation. My loyalty to Princess Margaret is unquestionable. I would undergo any difficulties because of that loyalty. Townsend was banished so quickly that he did not have time to prepare his sons, boarding at a prep school in Kent for the news. Margaret pleaded frantically with her sister to reverse the decision, but the princess was refused. The sisters had a terrible row. There's a note. Years later, Princess Margaret said, I have only twice ever had a row with the Queen. These were probably both about men. She explained to the historian Elizabeth Longford, in our family, we do not have rifts. We do not have rifts. A very occasional row, but never a rift. Margaret took to her bed for 3 days and lived on sedatives. Oh, isn't that sad? I've been there, girl. I get it. When she got up, she sat at her piano and poured her misery into music. I composed a lament, words as well as music, she told biographer Christopher Warwick. That was after Peter Townsend and I knew we couldn't get married. Townsend had left the country immediately upon his return from Northern Ireland with the royal couple and was last seen in England on the tarmac, shaking hands with the Queen and Prince Philip. There's a note. In his discreet autobiography, Townsend wrote that he had been prepared to like Philip, but when I went into exile in 1953, he did not exactly walk me to the door and say goodbye. He is a German, but he does not look very German. He is certainly trenchant, and his views are trenchant. I would say he is intelligent without being an intellectual. He could be abrupt, and he has the staccato way of talking, although he will often end things up with a joke or a quip. Let's look up that word. I mean, I've read it so many times. You know how there's so many words that you just read all the time or you've heard so many times and you just assume that you know the meaning, but if someone asked you the meaning, you would struggle to define it? Okay.
Trenchant.
Vigorous or incisive in expression and style. It can also mean having a sharp edge. Okay. He returned quietly to visit the princess twice before her 25th birthday, meeting her secretly at the homes of friends. In October of 1955, a few weeks after her 25th birthday, Margaret went to Windsor Castle to talk to the Queen and Philip. In an emotional meeting, they told her that the government of Sir Anthony Eden was implacably opposed to the marriage, as was the Archbishop of Canterbury. You are third in the line of succession, said Philip. I can count, Margaret snapped. You've caused a constitutional crisis, continued Philip, pointing to the lead editorial in the Times, which stated that a sister to the Queen, Governor of the Church of England, Defender of the Faith, had to be irrevocably disqualified from playing her part in the essential royal function if she married to a divorced man. If you persist in your plans to marry, said the Queen, you will not be allowed a church blessing. She went on to say that the wedding could not take place in Britain, that the couple would have to live abroad, that Margaret would lose her title and her annual allowance and be forced to abandon her place within the royal family. The princess left in tears. To avoid an unpleasant scene, her mother had withdrawn to her Castle of May home in Scotland. As tough as she was, the Queen Mother shrank from direct confrontation. She could never abide personal collisions and avoided them by contracting bronchitis or taking to her bed with flu or a headache. I'll have to remember that in the future. Without an advocate within the establishment, the couple were defeated. In anguish, they bowed to the pressure and decided to part, knowing they could never see each other again. Townsend drafted a statement that the princess approved, and her news was announced a week later when the BBC broke into its programming to read the text that was signed simply Margaret. I would like it to be known that I have decided not to marry Group Captain Peter Townsend, mindful of the Church's teaching that Christian marriage is indissoluble, and conscious of my duty to the Commonwealth, I have resolved to put these considerations before others. I have reached this decision entirely alone. Well, I don't know. I think, knowing me, I would have just been like, fine, take my title. Fine. I'll get married somewhere else. Fine. We'll live abroad. That's no problem. That's no problem for me. Honestly, she probably would have had a much better life, because I think she would probably regretted that for the rest of her life. I don't think she ever truly stopped loving him. And it seemed like every man that she took up with, maybe I think her final marriage, I think was it Margaret? No, I'm thinking of Anne. Never mind, I'm thinking of Anne. I think that every man that Margaret took up with, she was always trying to replace Peter Townsend, trying to recapture what she had with him, and she couldn't. And I think she was terribly unhappy as a result. And of course, hindsight is 2020, and I think that had the Queen been able to look ahead and see the devastation it would cause, and the years of torment and torture and alcoholism and, just really self-abuse, maybe she would have encouraged Margaret to go ahead. As the Fleetwood Mac song says, you can go your own way. All right, the Duke of Windsor felt outrage toward the establishment that had forced his niece to make her announcement. The unctuous, hypocritical cant and corn which has provoked in the Times and Telegraph by Margaret's renunciation of Townsend has been hard to take, the Duke wrote to his wife. The Church of England has won again, but this time they caught their fly, whereas I was wily enough to escape the web of an outmoded institution that has become no more than a government department. I mean, here's the thing. If I was Margaret and I was third in line, so I guess it says Charles, Anne, and then her. And I knew that my role was mostly symbolic. Baby, I would be out of there so fast, blinking you'd miss me. What a waste. What a waste of a life. I don't know. You tell me what you think. Okay. Many others felt profound sympathy for the princess, and a few letters of protest were published, but the vast majority of the public accepted the sad fact that she had done the right thing in putting duty first. The church was omnipotent. A picture has been built up in some quarters that the church started bullying a lonely girl into doing something she did not want to do, said the Reverend Peter Gillingham, one of the Queen's chaplains. That is false. All the church did was to make plain what the church's rules are. Embittered, Peter Townsend returned to Brussels, resigned from the Royal Air Force, and remarried a few years later. He lived in self-imposed exile in Rambouillet, southwest of Paris, and vowed never to return to England. In his autobiography, he wrote that he would like his ashes scattered in France, and if, he concluded, the wind, the south wind on which the swallows ride, blows them towards England, then let it be. I shall neither know nor care. 37 years later, when he was dying of cancer, he slipped into London to have a quiet lunch with the princess at Kensington Palace. It was kind of a goodbye, said one friend who was present. Townsend, then silver-haired but still handsome at 77, was suffering from stomach cancer, which he gallantly dismissed as a little gastric disorder. He died 3 years later with no regrets. Once a thing is behind you, you don't look back, he said. Life might have been otherwise, but it wasn't. The inflexibility toward divorce in royal circles had softened by then, but not the courtier's attitude toward that particular romance. Quite simple, really. Duty before diddling. Country before courting, said a former courtier. We did what we had to do to protect the crown, and after that, we had to launch the first royal tour. After her coronation, the Queen had agreed to spend 6 months traveling 40,000 miles around the world to greet 750 million of her subjects who inhabited 1/4 of the Earth's surface and conducted 1/3 of the world's trade. Let's see where we're almost done. She planned to visit 12 countries, 6 colonies, 4 territories, and 2 dominions. She would hear 276 speeches, receive 6,770 curtsies, and shake 13,213 hands. Eventually, she would become the most traveled monarch in British history. But in 1953, her first royal tour was a stupendous undertaking that had never been attempted by any head of state. The Queen wanted to be the first, because she was determined to present herself to her subjects as something more than a figurehead. "I want to show that the crown is not merely an abstract symbol of our unity," she said in her Christmas Day message from New Zealand, "but a personal and living bond between you and me." That tour was a grueling, merciless trip for everyone, recalled reporter Gwen Robbins, part of the small press contingent accompanying the Queen. "I was working for Evening News, the biggest circulation newspaper in the world at the time, and I watched the Queen every single day, every night, hourly sometimes. I can tell you that she could not have possibly survived that trip without the help of the Duke of Edinburgh." Highly disciplined, Elizabeth could stand for hours in the sun and ride a horse side saddle for miles. But interacting with people and having to make small talk with strangers for any extended period of time was a burden. She had grown up alone at Windsor Castle, spending her time with her sister, their servants, and their governess. She was not accustomed to accommodating others and did not know how to be socially ingratiating. Her gregarious husband, though, enjoyed bantering with others, engaging quips and being flirtatious. Philip was perfect for her. She was blindingly in love with him, said Gwen Robbins. She was so young and unsure of herself as queen, very, very self-conscious as monarch, painfully insecure. She did not know how to act or behave among so many people. But he was smooth and easy, more sophisticated. He'd jolly her into a good humor and warm her up for the crowds. She'd put on a grumpy face most of the time because she was overwhelmed, but he'd coax a smile out of her. He was disgusting to the press. "Here come the vultures," he'd say when he saw us. He threw peanuts at us in Malta, so we despised him. But we could see that he was truly marvelous for her. She brightened up around him. All he had to do was whisper in her ear, and she glowed. Every time she was cross and sour, he charmed a laugh out of her. He made her look good. He really carried her on that trip. I remember in Australia when she was numbed into boredom by having to shake hundreds of sweaty hands in blistering 110-degree heat. She scowled and looked ugly until Philip turned and said, "Cheer up, sausage. It is not so bad as all that." In New Zealand, the little Maori children were fairly jitterbugging with excitement to do their party piece for her by jumping off the riverbank. But the Queen didn't even look their way and instead walked to her car. Philip saw what happened. "Look, Bet," he said. "Aren't they lovely?" The Queen turned and went back to look at the children. Philip was fiercely protective of her when her energy started flagging, Gwen Robbins said. He would leap to her side and wave off photographers if he thought they were getting too close or might embarrass her. "Don't jostle the Queen," he'd say. While he was great for her, he was boorish to others. I remember in South Australia, the mayor of some little town was all got up in dreadful homemade robes of bunny rabbit fur to meet the Queen. He was about 70 years old, so sweet, so pathetic. He presented the Queen with a huge box and in a quivering voice said, "Your Royal Highness." Poor thing, he was supposed to say, "Your Majesty. At this very moment, our ambassador in London is presenting a similar box to your representative at the palace." "Oh, my God, man," roared Philip. "Don't you realize the 10.5-hour time difference between here and England? Your ambassador is probably sound asleep right now." The mayor wilted. Oh, poor thing. He looked as if he'd been accosted. It was so sad to see him standing there in his sorry little costume, shaking and stammering apologies. "I should have thought of that," he said, berating himself. Here it was, the day of his life, and he's crushed by the Duke of Edinburgh. Philip acted like a bastard. Oh, poor little guy. "Naturally, I couldn't report that kind of thing," said Robbins, "or any other personal details. When I noticed that the Queen always took her shoes off, which seemed endearing and human, I noted in one of my dispatches, 'The weary Queen slipped out of her shoes.' I got a rocket from my editor saying, 'Lay off the Queen. Buckingham Palace is furious with you.' Another time I wrote that the Queen looked tired. We knew that she was bored stiff with the flags and bunting and all that red, white, and blue every time she looked around. So I wrote that she looked fatigued like the rest of us. Another rocket. 'Lay off the Queen.' So I had to stop reporting the human side of the tour." The vigilant palace tried to protect the Queen from herself. They wanted to hide her human side, or what there was of it, said the Daily Telegraph's Maurice Weaver. I remember a royal visit to Papua New Guinea when the Queen was watching the natives perform a dance in their grass skirts. They were wearing circular necklaces made out of bones and twigs and strange coins. She turned to her equerry. "I feel these people need my effigy on their coins." So he rounded up the British reporters and asked them for their sovereigns. I filed a light story about the whip-around for the Queen and how we had to rustle up some coins. When the equerry found out, he banged on my hotel door in the middle of the night and demanded that I spike the story. It makes the Queen look poor, he said. Oh, rubbish, I said. It's a frothy little piece, and besides, no one expects the Queen to be carrying money. He said he had not written the real story, which was the Queen's pathetic noblesse oblige mentality about her poor, benighted natives. I can't make any sense out of that sentence. I feel like my brain has completely fritzed. So if you understood it, perfect. All right. So the froth stood. But he learned how sensitive the palace was to the Queen's press coverage. We were not allowed to write anything other than what the Queen wore and how she looked, he said. The palace press secretary would come out and feed us a description of Her Majesty in her green tulle gown, and we dutifully took it all down and reported it that way. As the Queen became more secure in her role, the palace press office relaxed, but only slightly. There's an unwritten agreement, said journalist Philip Knightley, who accompanied the Queen on her first royal tour. It's as if the palace said, you need us to bring in your readers, most of whom love royal stories. We need you to tell the Queen's subjects what she's up to, and what a wonderful person she is. So you can write anything you like about the royals, as long as you don't question the actual institution of the monarchy. Yet a soupçon of deference was expected. In New Zealand, only the American press could get away with mentioning the Queen's grammatical error. She had overheard two little girls arguing whether she was Queen Elizabeth or Princess Margaret. One said, I tell you, it's Princess Margaret. The other said, it's not, it's the Queen. With what Newsweek described as a cavalier disregard for the Queen's English, the sovereign leaned over to the little girls and said, no, it's me. After years of travel, the Queen eventually learned to carve a way for herself, but with great effort. She was always proper, but never warm and ingratiating, said Gwen Robbins. Still, stilted, and remote. She held herself at a distance, so she would never make a mistake, never put a foot wrong. She was so insecure that was the only way she could handle her role. She's not a woman who lights up in public like her mother, who on the surface is all bonnet, smiles, and feathers, but underneath is steel, cold, hard steel with a marshmallow casing. Despite obvious discomfort in the spotlight, the young sovereign starred in no fewer than 3 films that were spun out of the royal tour. 6 months after leaving London, she returned home to a rapturous welcome from her subjects, who lined the riverbanks as she sailed up the Thames on the royal yacht Britannia. They understood that she would never be the crowd-pleasing actress her mother was, but they still appreciated her solid commitment to duty. They roared their approval as the royal yacht approached, and the Queen acknowledged their cheers with a stiff little wave. She, too, knew how lacking she was compared to her charismatic mother. Like her stolid father, she depended on an appealing spouse. She later acknowledged as much to close friends when she paid tribute to her husband. Without Philip, she said, I could not have carried on. And that is the end of that chapter. Oh well, I was just thinking about how much I stutter and stammer. That's fine. All right, well, thank you so much for being with me. If I get a chance later on this evening, I will read another chapter of the Princess's book. And I have to go do some things and do some studying and blah. I will see you soon. Thank you for being with me. Remember to hit the bell and like and subscribe. I appreciate you all. Mwah.